I do remember many years ago when we started, we tried to get UCLA to host a roundtable with all the different candidates, and Charles Champlin from the LA Times was willing to moderate. And because they refused us, we ended up at the Globe Playhouse in West Hollywood, and we've been meeting ever since. So it's been a long and interesting journey, and I'm grateful for everyone who has joined us over the years, all the wonderful speakers who have volunteered their time. Oh, now I need to introduce Gerit Quealy, who is our wonderful moderator for today. She is the author of the Botanical Shakespeare, which is a wonderful book that explores every plant mentioned in all the Shakespeare plays, and you'd be surprised how many there are.
Thanks, Carol Sue. I'm just going to say Quayly because that is my life. It's correcting that. I feel like my whole life I've been looking for this utopian world or utopian place where you go and you discuss high-minded ideals and history and nobility, and it's been a hard go trying to find that place on earth. It's not Thomas More's utopia I'm looking for, or Philip Sidney's Arcadia. I often say to people, especially my family actually, that I prefer my drama on stage and not off. But I asked Alan Nelson for advice, who's a good friend of mine and has spoken to the SAR a number of times, I think. And he had great things to say about Carol Sue. And I know Carol Sue to be such a person of integrity that if we're on the road to some kind of utopia or Arcadia, where curiosity can be discussed, the Shakespeare Authorship Roundtable is probably the closest that I've come across anyway, so far to do that. And so here I am, and I'm thrilled to talk about our three speakers today, which run the gamut of academia and inquiry and curiosity and theatricality. And the first one is Julia Cleave. Julia Cleave is a member of the academic board and fellow of the Temenos Academy. She's a trustee of the Shakespearean Authorship Trust and of the Francis Bacon Research Trust. And she's a member of the De Vere Society, and she will be speaking on alchemy, which is sort of the umbrella term, I think, for this talk. And one of the things that shows up in Shakespeare plays, especially for me in Romeo and Juliet, which shows off this duality so much and how kind of nobody ever wins from a duality situation, but that we're also always trying to alchemize ourselves from our sort of leaden place of humanity to an exalted and golden and shining place of humanity. So Julia, tell us all about how to do that alchemically.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from across the pond, from Wivenhoe in England. It's wonderful to be with you all. I have set myself a challenge, Shakespeare and alchemy in 20 odd minutes. So here goes. I have slides, so I will now share my screen. Recent scholarship has established the influence of alchemy on Shakespeare's creative imagination. We catch it in glancing metaphors, gilding pale streams with heavenly alchemy, but sometimes sustaining a whole play. As we witness characters undergoing purgatorial journeys of suffering, transformation, and redemption, the stage becomes a chemical theatre. We, the audience, are cast in the role of the adept, observing and reflecting upon the dramas of conflict and resolution which transpire within the alchemical vessel. Shakespeare invites us to participate in these journeys of the soul. The Splendor Solis states, what the alchemists call gold stands both for gold splendor and soul splendor. In the 16th and 17th centuries, alchemy, natural magic, Kabbalah, and astrology were at the center, not on the fringes, of English and European culture. Here are just 3 examples of popular works you could find on the bookstalls of Elizabethan London in the 1590s. The Mirror of Alchemy, an anthology of texts attributed to the medieval friar Roger Bacon. Sir George Ripley's Compound of Alchemy, an elaborate alchemical poem which treats the 12 stages of the magnum opus, and Dr. John Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica. On the left, Sir George, depicted as the seeking philosopher, the alchemical pilgrim. On the right, Dee's hieroglyphic emblem, a symbol of cosmic oneness. These texts are not easy reading. In fact, they are willfully obscure, full of fantastical symbols and arcane language intended to baffle the uninitiated. Fortunately, there are pioneer scholars in this field who can act as our interpreters. Charles Nichols' Chemical Theatre includes a magisterial reading of King Lear in alchemical terms and sheds light on some bizarre scenes in Cymbeline. Lindy Abraham's dictionary is indispensable, providing definitions of over 500 alchemical terms. She has also written a fascinating article on Pericles. Margaret Healy gives us a sustained and subtle reading of Shakespeare engaged in a process of alchemical soul work in his sonnets. All three scholars provide invaluable background to the subject and its particular appeal to the poets and playwrights of the day. Dee was at the centre of this diffusion of alchemical thought, led by God. With Dee as teacher and with Dyer as companion, Philip Sidney learned chemistry, that starry science, rival to nature. Both Dee and Philip's sister, Mary Sidney, had alchemical laboratories. Their interests were shared by Sir Edward Dyer and Samuel Daniel. The Earl of Oxford corresponded with Dee. Francis Bacon conducted numerous alchemical experiments. Ben Jonson wrote his brilliant play, The Alchemist, a delicious satire on false practices, but also revealing his deep knowledge of the subject. Sir Walter Raleigh practiced alchemy while imprisoned in the Tower of London. The symbolic goal of the great work is the philosopher's stone, the stone which tincts, transmuting base metal into gold, the elixir which heals all and confers immortality. The French king who is healed in all's well refers to the god of riches, Plutus himself that knows the tinct and multiplying medicine. Cleopatra sees this same power in Antony when she complains of Alexis, "How much unlike art thou to Antony, that great medicine, who by his tinct hath gilded thee." While Enobarbus attributes the immortalizing powers of the elixir to Cleopatra, age cannot wither her, and the transmutational powers of the stone, she did make defect perfection. Alchemy takes its name from the ancient name for Egypt, Al-Chem, referring to the black earth which gestates gold. Antony swears by the fire that quickens Nilus slime. This is the raw matter, the prima materia to be worked on, but it is also itself the agent of transformation, the substance which first poisons and then heals to become the philosopher's stone. Hence this symbol of circularity, the serpent with its tail in its mouth, and the riddling slogan, from the one to the one, by the one. Antony calls Cleopatra his serpent of old Nile, and she identifies herself with this primordial matter in this otherwise baffling speech. Now I feed myself with most delicious poison. Think on me that am with Phoebus amorous pinches black and wrinkled deep in time. A further paradox, after this stress on oneness, at the same time it is bipolar energies which drive the alchemy of transformation. It is only through an initial conflict of opposites, male and female, sun and moon, sulfur and mercury, that final union may be won. In human terms, the fierce quarrels and bitter estrangements between Shakespeare's characters may be necessary preludes to reconciliation. The raw matter of the stone has to undergo a death and a resurrection, a process figured in three main stages, which are color-coded: nigredo, the blackening; albedo, the whitening; rubedo, the reddening. The red gold or purple, which marks the attainment of the philosopher's stone. We recognize the nigredo in the black moods, Saturnian melancholy, and deathly despair experienced by Shakespeare's characters when they reach a nadir in their fortunes, and illustrated here in Durer's famous image of the angel of melancholia, sunk in dejection. We may think of Hamlet with his inky cloak and customary suit of solemn black, or Pericles fleeing Antioch, dull-eyed melancholy, his sad companion, or setting sail with banners sable. Antony confessing, "Love, I am full of lead," or Enobarbus despairing, "All is lost," like the mariners in the Tempest. The albedo, the white stone, when the matter is purified and spiritualized, is figured as the White Queen, the goddess Diana, or crystallized substance like pearl or marble. After perils past, Pericles dreams of Diana as a goddess with a silver bow. Her temple at Ephesus is where his wife Thaisa is a votaress, awaiting their final reunion. Antony gifts Cleopatra with an orient pearl, anticipating the moment when she achieves the albedo and affirms, "I am marble constant." Here, the alchemist is shown fishing for coral, a symbol of the rubedo, the final stage of the opus, the red stone. In Ariel's haunting song in The Tempest, as Ferdinand steps onto the island, believing his father to be dead, the whole three stages are encompassed, from the blackness of apparent death to pearl white to coral red, and the golden promise of yellow sands. These words invoke the alchemical miracle of transmutation, what it is to suffer a sea change. 4 elements were believed to share qualities in common, which made it possible for one element to change into another, forming a circular process of subliming and distilling. The imagery of Antony and Cleopatra plays on this hierarchy of elements, expressive of changing emotions and qualities of being. Our dungy earth mixed with water becomes Nyla's slime. Water mixed with air becomes the winds and waters of Cleopatra's sighs and tears. Antony must choose whether to fight by sea or by land. He is firm by land, but experiences disaster at sea. His boast, "I'll fight in the fire, in the air," is empty, while Cleopatra does achieve this exalted state when she declares, "I am fire and air, my other elements I give to baser life." The 4 elements in combination are raised to their perfection in the quintessence, the stage at which the alchemist's art appears to outdo nature and matter is exalted. This is sometimes figured as a crowned and enthroned maiden, just like the vision of Cleopatra in her barge, like a burnished throne. Here is matter at its most refined and rarefied, the most precious metals, beaten gold and silver, perfumed sails, fabrics at their most exquisite, cloth of gold, of tissue. Cleopatra herself like a goddess. Oh, rare for Antony, indeed. The process of the work was also regarded as sevenfold, as an ascent through the 7 planetary metals, from base lead to noble gold. In this fantastical diagram, the alchemist is presented as a microcosm within a square of the 4 elements and the triangle of body, soul, and spirit. He must progress through the sequence of planetary metals, lead, tin, iron, gold, copper, mercury, silver, in order to achieve philosophical gold. There is a sequence of imagery in Antony and Cleopatra, which largely follows this metallurgical progression. For reasons of time, I'm going to skip this, just leave you to see my fuller account of this in my paper, because I now want to take you on a lightning tour of Sir George Ripley's 12 gates, starting with the first, which is calcination. This is the radical breaking down of matter by fire or water. Figured in Lear's word, I am bound upon a wheel of fire, that mine own tears do scald like molten lead. And in the seeming catastrophe of storm and shipwreck, which opens the tempest. Overlapping with calcination was the second gate, solution. The mercurial waters of dissolution and transformation were often symbolized as a sea, and the matter to be transformed was figured in the alchemical myth of the drowning king, who is to be saved and restored. Ariel carries out Prospero's instructions, all but mariners plunged in the foaming brine. It is a process of cleansing and purification, expressed in Hamlet's wish, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt and resolve itself into a dew. Antony experiences this dissolution as a radical loss of identity and near death. Here I am, Antony, yet cannot hold this visible shape. He sees phantom images in a vaporous cloud which dissolve as water does in water. The third gate is separation, making division of qualities elemental, separating the subtle from the gross. Lear's fateful decision to divide his kingdom leads to separation from his daughters, his servants, what need one, and his own sanity. In the shipwrecks in the Tempest and Pericles, the splitting is made literal. The ship should house him safe is wrecked and split. The plots of the romances turn on near tragic separations of husbands and wives, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. But separations are the necessary prelude to reunions. The fourth gate is conjunction. In Antony and Cleopatra, the language of dividing is contrasted with conjoining. Poor Octavia is the victim of a marriage of convenience with Antony, which is proposed for entirely political reasons, a false conjunction. It will serve to atone you, to knit your hearts with an unslipping knot. She will join our kingdoms, act as the cement of our love. The true final conjunction in alchemy occurs at the mysterious chemical wedding, a dying into love. The creation of the stone always involves some kind of sacrifice or death. This strange mixing of a wedding with death is expressed by Antony. I will be a bridegroom in my death and run into it as to a lover's bed. And the true union in marriage, which Cleopatra has so longed for, is only achieved in the grave. She shall be buried by her Antony. No grave upon the earth shall clip in it a pair so famous. But this is to anticipate the final union. The fifth gate, associated with dissolution and the nigredo, is putrefaction. Enobarbus, in his dying speech, calls on the poisonous damp of night to dissolve him. Cleopatra, rather than be paraded in triumph by Caesar, would prefer to die in a ditch, rather a ditch in Egypt, rather on Nilus mud. Lay me stark naked and let the waterflies blow me into abhorring. In the nigredo, disintegration of the matter may be achieved through putrefaction or mortification, what Ben Jonson calls the vexations and martyrizations of the metal. Hence the rich repertoire of ways to wound in Antony and Cleopatra. And the torture Cleopatra threatens on a messenger who brings bad news. Thou shalt be whipped with wire and stewed in brine, smarting in lingering pickle. In his emotional agony, Antony cries out, the shirt of Nessus is upon me. This is the shirt of poisonous fire, which ate into Hercules' flesh, acting just like the alchemist's acids, which dissolve metal. Congelation accompanies the albedo. It is the induration of soft things of colour white and the fixation together of spirits which are flying. It occurs when the volatile feminine mercurial spirits are congealed and made firm, symbolized by substances such as pearl and white marble. Cleopatra reaches this stage when she declares, My resolutions placed, and I have nothing of woman in me. Now from head to foot, I am marble constant. Now the fleeting moon, no planet is of mine. One of the most curious concepts in alchemy is that of the hermaphrodite, the idea that for final union to be reached in the stone, the opposed male and female must take on the qualities of their opposites. This motif makes sense of the cross-dressing scenes in Antony and Cleopatra. They are not just titillating love games. Oh, times I drunk him to his bed, then put my tires and mantles on him, whilst I did wear his sword Philippon. While Antony manifests so-called feminine qualities of tenderness towards his men, which cause them to weep, and Enobarbus to panic, transform us not to women, Cleopatra, in seeking to outwit Caesar, must develop a masculine will to action. My resolutions placed, and I have nothing of woman in me. 3 centuries before Jung, alchemy was unique in its recognition of the importance of integrating and balancing the complementary energies of animus and anima in the pursuit of wholeness, both within and between the genders. At the chemical wedding, the stone manifests as a product of the royal union in the form of the philosophical child. Cibation is the feeding and fortifying of this infant stone. Pericles' miracle child, Marina, is conceived in these terms. She is supposed to receive careful nursing. This motif makes deep sense of Cleopatra's strange speech in her final scene of dying and apotheosis. Dost thou not see my baby at my breast that sucks the nurse asleep? In her dream of Antony, Cleopatra acts the alchemist in bringing to perfection this noblest of men. She sublimes, vivifies, and exalts him in poetry of surpassing splendor. His face was as the heavens. His voice was propertied as all the tuned spheres. His delights were dolphin-like. In his livery walked crowns and crownets. Antony's dispensing of bounty and treasure to his men is couched in the language of the 2 penultimate stages of the opus, the multiplication, his bounty over plus, and projection, when the tincture is thrown over base metal to convert it into gold. The effect on Enobarbus is transformative. He is figuratively gilded and touched to the heart. O Antony, thou mine of bounty, how wouldst thou have paid my better service when my turpitude thou dost so crown with gold? This blows my heart. Shakespeare shows that the transformative power of the tincture is essentially love. I have passed through these 12 gates and examples at lightning speed. All of them need to be understood in full context. Here are my recommendations for further reading. Peggy Munoz-Simmons' article on the Tempest and Lindy Abraham's on Pericles are both freely available through JSTOR. Martina Zamparo's paper on The Winter's Tale is one of a collection under the heading of Shakespeare and His Contemporaries. And my own paper on Antony and Cleopatra is available through the Temenos Academy website. And I also wish to commend the website of the Shakespearean Authorship Trust. Thank you.
First of all, how amazing your images are. Someone has asked, Alevi Pena has asked, if there is any correspondence extant between the Earl of Oxford and John Dee.
Well, Earl may help me here, but I think there's just a reference that John Dee makes at one point, saying that he was in correspondence with the Earl in 1570. I know no more than that. I just wonder if in some of the writing of the day there might, or some of the poetic tributes to Oxford, there's a hint. I mean, there certainly associates him with astrology. Not necessarily specifically with alchemy.
Well, and we're at a deficit too, because John Dee's library was so dispersed and stolen. So much of it was stolen when he was traveling. And the miracle of finding his papers in the chest, I think in the 18th century that some woman was using for, or 19th century that some woman was using for kindling, and until she realized what the papers were. So one of my questions is, I always think of alchemy as a sort of metallurgic activity, but you broaden that to color and so when the plays, or I guess with Sir Walter Raleigh doing Alchemy in the Tower, I mean, there's what you call the soul splendor, but then there's the practical pursuit of alchemy, which was for riches, right?
Well, yeah, well, it was, yes, in some case, I mean, encouraged by the Queen. And of course, she had a particular mining company where they were, a lot of these people like the Earl of Leicester and Burleigh were co-investors and so on. So certainly from the state policy point of view, there was a search for treasure. And of course, Oxford was an ill-fated mining venture as well. But the two went hand in hand. So it was a hands-on practical thing because it was through the processes of real engaging with all these kind of rebarbative substances that you were working simultaneously on yourself. So the philosophy went with the practical, and there's clear evidence for that at the time.
It's still a kind of a chicken and egg thing, though, isn't it? It's like what had more immediate relevance. But so presumably, if people are going to see these plays, how much of the alchemical message are they understanding and absorbing?
Well, I think a good example to look at is actually Ben Jonson's The Alchemist, because of course that on one level is a fantastic send-up of all the chicanery that surrounded these charlatans who supposedly practiced alchemy. But actually, it's a textbook in another way of all sorts of alchemical lore. And clearly, Ben Jonson knew it every which way. I mean, it's very funny, but to be that funny and witty, you've got to know your stuff. And it's clear that these people knew. So the cognoscenti, yes, would have appreciated these. And just briefly back to Romeo and Juliet, I agree, more could be made of Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it ends with them being golden statues. And then there's some very interesting imagery, if I remember correctly, about coal mining in the opening scene, something like that. So we go from black dust,
yes, yeah. But
statues.
also Romeo is talking about feather of lead, and then the tips with silver, all these fruit tree tops. So throughout the play, you find the sort of alchemical progression.
Yes.
So does anyone else have any questions for Julia? Please type them in the chat. But presumably, Julia, somebody would, okay, your brilliance is being applauded. Will people be able to ask you questions if they wake up in the middle of the night with a sort of alchemical revelation?
Well, if Sylvia and Rima are happy to relay questions to me, of course, yes.
Perfect.
I mean, it's a lifetime study, and I hope I've made clear how much I'm indebted to, pioneers in the field who have written so well. Those 3 books I recommended at the beginning and those articles at the end, I recommend all of them. They're really of high quality.
But this is the thing I was thinking about, just what everybody talks about. Lawyers think Shakespeare was a lawyer and doctors think Shakespeare was a doctor. You could totally and wholly concentrate on the alchemical stories being told here to the almost exclusion of all else. And it does become overwhelming. And so we're very grateful to you for navigating us through this progression ourselves to understand the alchemical story being told as well. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.